Disclaimer, just like last episode, there will be mention of sexual assault and harassment. Welcome back to Greek Talk, the podcast where we talk about all things Greek mythology. In the last episode, we talked about Medusa's side of the Perseus and Medusa myth. This episode, we will talk about Perseus' side of the story, as well as how he would be treated in modern day. To start off this episode, just like the last one, I know that this story does not have a lot of attention on it, so I'd like to go over kind of what his story is, like an overview of his story. So his story starts out with his mother's father. His mother's father, his grandfather, was the king. He had only had one daughter, his mother, and no sons. This was a time when you needed to have a son as an heir to a throne. So he went to the Oracle of Delphine, which was a very popular oracle who could sort of tell the future, or a version of the future, in a very ominous way, and it was very widely accepted that kind of what the Oracle of Delphine said you should take with like a grain of salt, because it was kind of twisted. So he went to the Oracle of Delphine to ask if he would ever have a son. She said no, that he would never have a son, but that his daughter would have a son, except that her son would eventually kill him. Obviously, he was not happy about this. So when he got back to his big fancy castle, he decided he was going to lock away his daughter in a cell, so that she could not have any children or husbands or any of that sort of thing. Except this did not work because Zeus saw her inside of this prison of sorts, and thought she was really pretty. So he turned himself into gold and literally like spilled down as like liquid gold into her cell, and then reformed into a human-like form. And then 9 months later, she gave birth to Perseus. When the king found out that she had given birth, he put both Perseus and his mother into a box and basically threw them into the ocean. You know, as you do. Zeus saved Perseus and his mother by telling Poseidon to kind of steer or guide the box towards an island. When they got to the island, they were discovered by a fisherman who also happened to be that island's or kingdom's. He was their king's brother. And that fisherman then took care of them for, I think, about 18 years, basically until Perseus was of adult age for that time. So it was between 18 and 16. After a little while of staying with the fisherman, the king took notice of Perseus's mother and found her very pretty, and like instantly fell in love. But Perseus's mom did not like him. So for the rest of the time that Perseus was growing up, for those next 18 years that they were taken care of by the fishermen, the king made advances towards Perseus's mother, and Perseus, once he was old enough, would kind of fight off the king or like intimidate him to get him to go away. After Perseus turned 18, the king came up with a plan. He told the whole kingdom that he would be marrying a princess. He was not. When you got married back then, people would bring you cows as gifts. Not kidding. Perseus could not bring the king a cow, so instead he asked the king what he wanted instead, and the king said, the head of the Gorgon Medusa. So, off he went to go get the head of Medusa. To make a very, very, very long, complicated story short, when he gets to the cave, he cuts off Medusa's head, and finds that it can turn people to stone even while it is not attached to her body. On his way back home, he saves a woman who then becomes his wife, and later gives him children and all that fun stuff. When he gets back home, he notices that, or he finds out that the king sent him away so that he could marry his mother, which he is not happy about. So instead of just letting this be, he uses said Gorgon Medusa head to turn the king and all of his, like, I guess, men, family, friends, whoever was in the room with him when he showed up to the castle, to stone, saving his mother from the marriage because, you know, the king's dead now. And then the fisherman, who, remember, was the king's brother, then becomes king and takes over the kingdom. Later, kind of in the story, after his relevance to Medusa, he does end up accidentally killing his grandfather by throwing a discus at his head by accident during like a big tournament. So, fun times. Now, after explaining the story, now that you have a little bit of a background about why he beheaded Medusa, I'd like to talk about kind of the stance a lot of people have on Perseus. I have seen a lot of people who, I don't want to say claim to be feminists, but who identify as feminists. I have seen a lot of them say that Perseus is in the wrong and that he's selfish, or that he, basically that he should have known better. But I greatly disagree with that because, for one, he is a child. He is, I believe, he's somewhere in between 16 and 18, so not very old, brain not fully developed. And two, he could not have known Medusa's story. And, I mean, third, he did all of this to save his mother from essentially a life of her being miserable, as well as him being miserable, honestly, because he would have to live with the king, who he did not like. A lot of people see him as kind of, I guess, like the bad guy of Medusa's story, which I personally disagree with. I think that the gods are, in fact, the villains of Medusa's story. They are the ones who hurt her. They are the ones who assault her and punish her for things she didn't do. So I disagree with the people who see him as a bad person. Medusa and Perseus' stories are not connected for very long. They only really interact for maybe a few minutes, but their two individual stories greatly impact each other's. And I think that in both of their scenarios, they were trying to do what was right for them and for the people around them. So I believe that both Perseus and Medusa should not be seen as bad people. They should be seen as Medusa should be seen as a victim of circumstance, of honestly just the people around her, and Perseus should be seen as a hero to the people he cared about, and maybe just as an unfortunate event to Medusa and her sisters, because he really didn't know he was doing something wrong. He thought he was killing a monster, which is what you did. As a Greek hero, you killed monsters. So I believe he should not be punished for any of the actions that, to him and to everyone around him, were not wrong. This does not excuse murder, but he and everyone around him thought that he was saving them from this monster, because they did not know her story. And I'm sure back then, even if they did know her story, they still would have seen her as a monster, but you cannot blame them for not knowing the full story. Thank you for listening to my episode about Perseus. If you haven't listened to the first episode about Medusa, go listen to that. And I will be doing one more episode in this series. It will not be talking about the original myth, but in fact it will be talking about a book I read in preparation for these episodes. So yeah, go listen to those, and thank you for listening to this.